I'm going to go through with you the multiple choice questions on the mock paper. So you might want to have a go at them first and then you can check the answers with this video. So, first question was, which experimental design was used in the Loftus and Palmer study investigating the effects of leading questions on memory? Now, on the research methods paper, they're quite sneaky. They like to put in some multiple choice questions about the core studies that are kind of research method questions, but they're about pieces of core study research. And they do that because they want to make sure that you actually remember the core studies and you've not just crammed it for the actual core study exam. So on this one, Loftus and Palmer study is about leading questions. It's about the critical question being asked. You've got 45 students in the first experiment and 150 in the second experiment, and they all do a different condition of the IV. So in the first one, they take part in a different verb, and in the second one, it's either the smash, the hit, or the control group where they're not asked about speed. So they're always only taking part in one condition of the IV, and it's different participants from the first experiment to the second experiment. So for that reason, the answer to this question is A, an independent measures design. Well, a laboratory experiment isn't a design, so you can automatically rule that one out. And it's not matched pairs because they didn't match them on any variable, and it's not repeated measures because they only took part in one condition of the IV. Number two, peer review of a piece of new psychological research should be conducted by. It's always another researcher working in the same field of psychology. You need somebody who understands what your paper is about. If you got someone to do it who's in a different field of psychology, they won't be able to check whether you were lying or not, or if you've done something wrong, because they wouldn't understand what your paper was about. Quite complicated research is difficult to understand if it's not your field. It would be like a physicist trying to understand a paper on religion and philosophy. It'd be very difficult for them to do if it's not their field. I mean, that's across subjects, but even in psychology, you can have a kind of neuroscience, and you're comparing that with developmental psychology. It's completely different. Unless it's your field, it would be very difficult for you to check that. But it's definitely not that. Government ministers do not care about psychological research. A lot of their policy is not informed by psychological research. So, for example, learning styles in education is not supported by research. So it's definitely not A. And then the head of psychology department in the university where the research was conducted, well, you're going to get problems there, aren't you? Because they might have a conflict of interest. So they want the paper to get through because they want to get published. So they might not see it as much as what somebody who's objective would. So it's C. A. A psychologist has designed a new psychometric test to measure extroversion. So this is kind of like a test where you have a number, a score at the end of it, and then that tells you how extroverted you are. So extroversion is kind of like how outgoing you are. It's the opposite of being quite shy. She gives 30 participants both her test and an established personality test. And if it's an established personality test, it means that it's already been validated to be correct, to actually measure extroversion. So it's a good test. And it compares their scores on the two tests. Now, what is she trying to establish by doing this? Now, if you're looking for agreement on two tests, it's concurrent validity. You've noticed this from the Baron-Cohen study. So Baron-Cohen used a validated theory of mind test, which is Hapster and Stories, checked it against the eyes task, and if they got a similar score, it had concurrent validity. They concurred, they agreed with each other. Criterion validity is about the ability to use one test to predict the outcome in another test. So, for example, a marshmallow test in Casey might have criterion validity because it does predict the outcome on the cognitive go no-go task. So it's definitely in this case not criterion validity. There's no prediction there of what will happen. Ecological validity is about how real to life something is. So, does your test in a lab explain how somebody would behave in a real life situation? If not, then it lacks ecological validity. And then external validity is about population validity and also ecological validity. So ecological and population both go under the heading of external validity. Obviously, population validity is how much your sample and how what the results are reflects the actual behaviour of everybody in the target population. So in this case, it's concurrent validity. Number 4, which of these is the name of the referencing system used to cite academic research? And the answer is Harvard. Now, all 4 of those are universities, and The first one is obviously in England, the bottom three are in America. The Milgram study is at Yale, the Casey study and the Banjora studies are both at Stanford. But the Harvard is the referencing system that we use, so it was B. Number 5, which comes first in academic reference? So an academic reference is where you kind of cite like the author's name and the kind of like the year that it was published and the title of the journal and all that kind of stuff. So it's not talking about an academic paper or a journal, it's talking about an academic reference. So in this case, it's the surname of the researcher. So that comes first. So it's C. Number 6, in which section of practical reports, so like a journal article, would you find the calculations performed for an inferential statistical test? Now, there's a lot of confusion over this one because you would assume that it would be in the results section because you've done a test, but you actually only display the findings of the test in the results section. Any kind of stuff that you've worked out or any kind of calculation that the computer's done or anything like that, because it's not necessary for the actual report, it goes at the end in an abstract. So in your actual main body in the results section you would put like a table of results, but how you've worked those out would be in the abstract. So for example, you might have a table that's got descriptive statistics like the mean in, and then you might put how you've calculated the mean in the abstract. So the correct answer for that was A. Number 7, which is a principle of scientific inquiry. Now this was kind of one where you would have had to have used your common sense. Now if you look at all 4 of those options there, so implication, induction, information, initiation, I've only actually taught you one of them, so it's obvious that it's going to be that one. So never ever have I mentioned implication or information or initiation, but I have taught you about induction because we looked at induction and deduction. So I talked about inducing a woman and a birth in a theory, so that was the answer to that question. Number 8, look at the following scattergram diagram. So it's a graph to show the relationship between empathy scores and leadership scores. So empathy is the ability to kind of understand what someone else is thinking and feeling, almost like theory of mind. And leadership score, so how well you are at leading. So what they've done is they've tested them on 2 kind of things, and they've correlated the results to see if there's a relationship. Now it says here, which is the best estimate of the correlation coefficient for the above data? So when you get a number from a correlation, it's called a coefficient. And if you've got a, if you put a line of best fit on here, it slopes downwards, doesn't it? So we know straight away, as one variable increasing, the other one's decreasing, so it's a negative correlation. So straight away that gets rid of C and D because you have a negative correlation, so it's either A or B. Now the numbers, if they're really, really close together and they're all in a straight line, so they're all on the line, then that's a correlation of 1. If they're really, really far apart, it's 0. So if you've got this one, you've got options of 0.7 and 0.2. Well, they're quite close to the line, so the correct answer is A. It's minus 0.7. Number 9, which sampling technique did Baron Cohen use to obtain the participants for his study of theory of mind? Now, whenever it's asking you about an experiment and you've got different kind of groups that were recruited. So for example, in this one you've got a normal group, a Tourette's group and an autism group. The main experimental group is the autism group and the other 2 are just controls. So we're interested, when we're talking about the sample, in the experimental group, so the autism group. So we want to know on this one, how were the autism group recruited? How were they obtained? And they're obtained by an advertisement in a national autism magazine, and the participants replied to that advertisement. So it was a volunteer self-selected sample. So that was the correct answer of C. Number 10, a binomial sign test is correctly used to assess the significance of a set of results. What level of data and type of design is necessary to carry out this test? Now, binomial sounds a bit like, binomial sounds a bit like nominal. So it's nominal data, surprisingly. So it gets rid of C and D straight away. So you've either got A or D. Now, bi is like bicycle, which is like 2. So it's a repeated measures design. So it should be A. Nominal data using a repeated measures design. Number 11, which of these is associated with the term demand characteristics? So It's not personality traits of the participants, because that would be an individual difference or a participant variable. They mean the same thing. There's not that one. Instructions given to the participants by the research are just instructions, aren't they? So that's not anything. Or it could be, I mean, what do they call it? Like that can be standardised, but I'm sure it's got a name, but I can't think of it. Compulsory things that the participant must do. Well, that just makes no sense. Changes in the participant's behaviour as a consequence of knowing they are being studied. Well, it's obviously that one, A, because the other three don't make any sense. So, and you know that demand characteristics is where someone figures out that they're being studied and guesses the aim and then changes their behaviour to please or displease the researcher. So it's A. Number 12, what is a null hypothesis? Well, null hypotheses always state that there's going to be no significant difference. Now, these two here are saying there's going to be a significant difference, so it's definitely not those two. And this one here says will not perform significantly better in front of an audience than introverted people. So you're still predicting something. So this one's the only one that says that there's going to be no significant difference between them, so that's the one that's a null. So D was the correct answer for that one. Number 13, which is a way of addressing the issue of demand characteristics in an experiment. So again, another kind of process of elimination. Not testing the participants together. Well, you could do that, but is that really going to stop them from guessing what the aim is? Because they're still doing the experiment, so maybe it will reduce it a little bit, but it's not really the best way to address it. Not giving instructions to the participants, well, they won't know what they're doing, so that's a silly suggestion. Not measuring participants' behaviour, well, what's the point of doing the research? That makes no sense either. Not sharing the aim with the participants until the end. That would be the best way, because you are leaving it until the end, and then obviously you're making sure it's ethical so that you do actually tell them at the end. So C is the best way of addressing demand characteristics in an experiment. Number 14, what is a quasi-experiment? Well, a quasi-experiment is where you've got a naturally occurring IV. So it's not this one about there being more than one independent variable, or that there is no independent variable, because if there's no independent variable, it's not an experiment. So it's definitely not those two. And then this one here, the only difference is that it's directly manipulated or it cannot be directly manipulated. Now, directly manipulated means to be able to change it, to be able to say what's happening with that IV. Now, if it's a naturally occurring IV, you cannot directly manipulate it. So the correct answer is A. And then finally, 15, which of these would produce interval level data? Now, this is quite a difficult question because it takes, again, the process of elimination. So B says ratings of attractiveness of people with pupils of different sizes. So different sizes suggest that it's in categories, so it's nominal data. In fact, does it? Yeah, because you're comparing the pupils' different sizes with each other, categories with each other. The number of people who hold the door open for a person behind them when entering a shop. Well, it's either that they've held the door open or they've not. So again, you've got two categories there of the data. Estimates of the number of sweets in a jar. You've only kind of got a certain number that it will go up to. Interval data is where you've got equal intervals between something. So, for example, reaction time, you've got equal intervals. You know, the difference between a 1 and a 2 is always the same as between a 2 and a 3 and between a 4 and a 5. So the intervals are always the same. It's really a horrible question, that one, and I wouldn't be surprised if you got it wrong because it confused me when I looked at it. But the right answer for it is C. If you ever see anything like time or temperature or something that's kind of a standardised unit of measurement, it's interval data, apart from shoe size, because shoe size would be ratio. But then this exam board treats ratio and interval as the same, so if you see that, it's probably going to be interval data. I hope that was helpful. Have a look at what you got and learn from this so that you get it right next time.